I'm delighted to introduce you to the first panel of the afternoon to talk about post-consumer textile collections. Please welcome Ross Barry, co-founder of Reskin, which aims to divert clothing from landfill by reselling, repurposing, or recycling. Ross is chairing this session and will be joined by Catherine Beecham, Head of Sustainability in Clothing at Mark & Spencer, Marion Frost, Head of Environment and Sustainability at Salvation Army, Edward Galsby, Head of Partnership at Oxfam, Joe Little, Head of Technical, Raw Materials and Colors, Packaging and Sustainability at Tesco, and Peter Page, Group Head of Recycling at Textile Recycling International, TRI.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if you guys are getting up onto the panel before I spoke or after, but here we are. So, thank you everyone. Hello, for those who know me. Those of you who don't, hello. I'm sure a lot of you might be sitting there looking a bit Ross from Reskinned, and you're saying, no, that's Ross from LMB. Don't worry, it's the same person. Yes, so today I'm here representing Reskinned. We've been, well, I say we, I'll be honest, Hannah, who unfortunately isn't here, has been leading Work Package 2, looking at trials for post-consumer textile collection trials. Hannah's done a brilliant job, but unfortunately she's had to go to the dentist because she's got very bad teeth. No, that sounds bad. She's got a bad tooth. She's got lovely teeth. I did say it'd be the same old me, didn't I? So, big thanks, Hannah. And thank you, Floor, for introducing ACT, so I don't have to go through exactly what the whole ACT system is all about. But I think something that I want to draw upon is what Floor actually said. Just to set the stage, we're looking at a revolution for managing textiles. And as you can see, Reskinned is about join the rewear revolution. I don't want to come across all Tracy Chapman, but we're talking about a revolution here. The system, as it currently stands, is fundamentally flawed, it's broken. So we're looking at how we can, together, get behind that and change it. So just to give you a very brief overview of what Reskin does, I hope you all know who we are. If you don't, shame on you. It's a company, we work with brands. The idea is that we help them manage the clothing that they've put out in the world. We help them take it back. We help them deal with it once we have it. Our priority is to try and promote reuse. So for a consumer point of view, what we want to do when we set up the company was make buying pre-loved as an enjoyable experience as buying new, which is challenging in itself. But hopefully we're getting there. So yeah, we do take backs for everyone. So the current system is broken and there's a revolution. So the discussion is this going to be first against the wall type revolution? If we look at some forms of EPR, it may seem like that, especially for those brands that are perhaps in a very bad way and are perpetuating fast fashion. It could look quite nasty. For other brands, it might be a little bit more of a John Lennon start a revolution from your bed. You know, you're doing a good job, we don't have to do a lot. I think the important thing is it's going to take the general public to get involved in this, and that's very much what this work package is all about. So, here we all are trying to save the world. Hopefully, MTC are going to come on afterwards and let us know that if we do collect all of the clothing, they're going to be able to do something with it. If they come on and they say they can't, then frankly, it's been a bit of a waste of time us being here, so let's hope. So, the idea is, it's a little bit chicken egg. We've got to work on the basis that we're getting all of these NRTs back in. As I've said, there is a current system for collecting them, and I think, or hopefully, everyone knows Oxfam, SACCOL, TRI, or their various guises. What we've got here is, you know, the real big hitters of the industry, and I think as a panel, I've not seen this before, you know. If you throw away something in a donation bin, textile bank, clothing group, charity shop, you know, chances are it's going to go through one of these guys' facilities. I know there's the TRA here, and obviously their members are, but, you know, this is a big industry and they're collecting hundreds of thousands of tonnes a year. And the problem is, it is still not collecting everything. There's a lot going into the bin, goes into black sacks, ends up in waste stream, chances are it ends up in landfill. The assumption is that most people are good citizens and they know that they can throw away their rewearable textiles and it'll go to a good use, and we hope that's what happens. The overall presumption is that anything that goes in the black sack probably isn't. It's an NRT. So part of this trial is to firstly find out if the public do know what they're doing, how we can educate what they're doing, but also one of the biggest sort of carbon elements of recycling is the transport of goods. Textiles are heavy, they're bulky, they're not easy to move around, they don't stack nicely on pallets, so unless you put in a bale, they're really hard to move. So the idea is, what we'd like to do in an ideal world is all those clothes that are suitable to be reused, reworn, borrowed, rented, whatever, go in one direction, and when things at the end of their usable life, so they've got stains, rips, whatever else, they cannot be reused, they are sent to the proper facility, so thus cutting out a lot of middlemen. So that is the part of what this package is for. So if I could ask the panellists to get up on stage, if they may. I'm going to stay here and be in charge of the button pressing. I would let them doing it, but the unions wouldn't let me, so over to you guys. I don't know how you're doing this. Are you talking together or sitting there?
The next slide.
I will press the next slide for you. That's my job.
Yeah, so that was just a little video to show what we showed to our customers and the Oxfam supporters, just to show a little bit about the project and how we took part. But yeah, we weren't really sure what was going to happen when we first took part, were we? But the plan was basically originally we thought, do we put an extra box into our stores that had the non-wearables and the wearables next to each other? But the timescale of the pilot didn't really allow for us to work out how to do that, and the logistics of it looked a bit scary. But Oxfam already had an amazing postal scheme, and so we decided to take advantage of that and see if we could try to do by post, because we all know that we've all got clothing at home that we don't really want to have to truck to a high street, to a shopping centre or to a M&S store. So could we take advantage of the awesome pilot, the postal scheme that Oxfam already had, but do a variation of it? So we got started.
Yeah, and I guess to Ross's point of kind of what is different about the trial, so Oxfam and M&S have worked together for a long time, since 2008, with the shopping take-back scheme, really one of the pioneers of a customer take-back scheme. And through that scheme, we've collected over 36 million items of clothing. But all of our messaging, all of the messaging through the take-back scheme, but all of Oxfam's messaging through donation in our store, our post-donation scheme, focuses on good quality clothing that can be resold. We know even by saying that over and over again, we'll still get the stuff that can't be resold. It's just people will sneak something into the bottom of the bag that they just want to get rid of. So what was different with this trial is we were saying, send us everything and we'll collect it. We'll look at what can be done with it, with a view to having that feedstock for when fibre to fibre is a possibility. And as Catherine says, we weren't sure what the reaction to that was going to be. So we initially said that we were going to have 7,000 bags available for a time-limited trial, that people could request a bag, we would send it out. And as you saw in the video, the key ask was for them to do that pre-sort of, this is the good stuff that's kind of suitable for resale, this is the stuff that's at its end of life and can go to recycling. And yeah, safe to say we were pleasantly surprised, slightly shocked by the kind of the media uptake and the interest. So we had over 80 pieces of media coverage with a huge reach in the first few days, and that translated to
mass panic, if we're being honest. So yeah, I think it was about 9,000 bags went in the first few days, wasn't it? Or was it
about 6,000?
6,000 in the first 9 days, yeah.
We actually, we would have been in even more trouble, but the Guardian actually put the wrong link into their article, which actually turned out to be a bit of a blessing, because I'm fairly sure we would have sold out on the first day.
Yeah, so that was quite helpful in a way. But yeah, it was an absolutely amazing response, and it wasn't all M&S employees. This was a good spread. But it was just fantastic, and our PR team did an absolutely amazing job of getting it out there. But it was amazing how quickly it got picked up and how much it was talked about. So it really did show that there are people who are really interested in this, and everybody does have an amazing amount of clothes, wearable and NRTs, in their wardrobes. And it was really interesting to see what then came back, wasn't it?
Yeah, so that was the next step, is we sent out a lot of bags. We had to print more bags, so we extended the trial to 10,000 bags just to keep up with demand, because we knew there was more media coming. So BBC Breakfast were going to do a piece on it, Radio 4 were covering it, so we wanted to make sure we had some stock for people to request. But obviously then it was the wait to see, okay, what comes back, and there's always a bit of a delay because people get their bag and they kind of spend some time sorting stuff out. But yeah, we're pleased that we've had a good return rate. So it's continuing to go up over time, but we're at about 21% return rate, which is roughly in line with our own baseline, so at the baseline of our regular postal scheme. So even though we're asking people to do that extra step of the pre-sort, it doesn't seem to be a kind of barrier to them sending it back. And we're seeing some really interesting results in terms of what's coming back. So over 5 tons of material coming back. Around 60% of that so far is NRT, which is higher than what we would normally see. So that suggests that people understand that this is different to our regular scheme. Our regular scheme, we would see about 27%-ish NRT. This we're seeing around 60% NRT, so people understand that this is different and it's an avenue for that other material. And we're also seeing around 30 to 40% of people taking that step of doing the pre-sort and putting the non-rewearables into a separate bag. So they're also understanding what we're asking them to do on that front as well. So that's really encouraging. We've also had whole bags where the whole bag is NRT. So people kind of taking advantage of the fact that they've got a drawer full of stuff that they don't know what to do with. And we've even had notes in the bag saying, "Thank you so much for offering this. Here's a bag full of all of my old socks that I didn't know what to do with." So whether we'd want to kind of receive old socks forever and whether that's a sustainable business model is another question. But there's definitely a kind of demand and an uptake there.
And it was interesting, so we sent out a notice inside the envelope that explained the difference between the normal scheme and this scheme, and sort of tried to teach the customer like actually how to do it as well as the video. So I think there is a real need for education here, and also, you know, to really make people understand what's the not wearable, because what I think isn't not wearable isn't necessarily what Ed thinks is not wearable, because Oxfam can sell a lot of things at festivals, things that aren't my taste might be someone else's taste. So it was really, we had to be really clear to people like what do we actually mean by the non-wearable. So I think there is a big consumer message and training was actually needed here to make sure we got the right stuff. But we were also worried that Oxfam would end up with no wearables, and you know, that's obviously a massive problem for a charity to do this whole scheme with us and then end up with just non-wearables that were, you know, a cost to them and not income stream. So we were really pleased that the trial worked, and they also got an uptake in wearables as well, which was great.
If you're texting while you're ironing, very soon you won't be smiling. It might be ruined, but it needn't be wasted. Please donate your worn-out clothes to the Salvation Army.
So this is our trial, so very different to the M&S Oxfam trial. Our one was in our some of our clothing banks, so 20 clothing banks in the east of England in collaboration with Tesco. So it was in 18 Tesco banks, and then we also had 2 local authority community recycling centres involved in the trial. And I guess for us at Setco, we were keen to get involved in the trial with the largest UK charity textile collector. We collect nearly 70,000 tonnes of textiles a year, which is a lot. And luckily, most of that is rewearable, which is great, and we can resell and generate funds for the Salvation Army. But some of it is not rewearable, so we're doing a lot of work around closing that textile-to-textile recycling loop. So we were really keen to get involved in this trial, and actually our Salvation Army colleagues in Norway ran a very similar trial, before we even started the ACT project, and they had some really interesting results from those trials, and they really managed to get people on board. So we were keen to see what the UK public or the UK's response would be to this trial, and really pleased that Tesco wanted to get involved with us. So Joe, it would be great if you could tell a bit about why you were keen to get involved.
Yeah, before I say why Tesco wanted to get involved, Ross, Tracy Chapman, I've now got that song in my head. So I'm going to help everyone, okay? I'm going to remove Tracy from your head. I'm going to implant something else. You were working as a waitress in a cocktail bar when I met you. I picked you out, shook you up, turned you around, and I made you into a textile new garment. So look, thank you for Tracy, but the audience is quite young, and probably not many of you still look at Facebook as well, but as I was on the train this morning, my Facebook memories popped up. And probably not many of you remember what you were doing on the 26th of September in 2018, 6 years ago today. But I was in India on a sustainability strategy week. I had taken out 2 of my main board non-executive directors, so the guys who are absolutely responsible for keeping the board in line. And I was taking them out to the cotton fields and all of that stuff. But when we got to the end of the week, and the non-exec who is responsible for sustainability said to me, Joe, what does the future look like? Actually, what I said to them was pretty much what we're experiencing today, and what an awesome morning session it was. I said to them, the future looks like fibre to fibre, textile to textile recycling, because if we don't achieve that, then we don't get to net zero. And this morning, actually, net zero wasn't mentioned until Stephen came back on the stage at 12:30. So it was 2.5 hours into the session before net zero was even mentioned. And the reason that Tesco wanted to get involved in this was if we don't bring ACT to life, we don't get to net zero. And that roadmap to net zero means that by 2030, we've got to reduce by 50%. So all of you guys who are signed up to Textiles 2030, we've got to bring this to life. We've got to make this happen. And whether the consumers are ready or not, we've got to make it happen. And I think some of the insights that we were seeing were really interesting. Because if I go back 6 years ago to 2018, when that non-executive then said to me, Joe, I've got your next step, and your next step is simply to take back more than Tesco sells by 2030. But you're not allowed to do any incentive, no vouchers, no incentive, other than make it simple, as easy as possible a journey for the customer as possible. Change the customer behavior. So it wasn't about anything other than making it simple. And I think with Satcall, that's what we've been achieving.
And I think that really sort of links to how we had to approach this project, because obviously the main interaction point for people is when they're in front of the clothing bank, and there's sort of, it's really important to get that message right as to what goes in what bin. So we spent quite a lot of time on developing that worn-out bank and the guidance that's on it. And I'm sure you'd all like to know, well, what are the results of your trials? So on the next slide, you can see that actually, so these are the wear again banks, and on the right you can see the worn out banks, and you can see that in both banks the majority of the content is re-wearable, which is great for us as a charity, of course. And you can start to see a slight shift in the amount of worn out clothing in a worn out bank. It's still fairly small, and actually this change was there from the beginning of the trial. So people sort of straight away, some people sort of straight away got the difference between the two banks, which was really interesting. And actually over the whole trial we saw an increase in the amount of textiles donated to these trial sites, and that's because we did quite a lot of work around regional advertising, so that was interesting. But in terms of the actual amount of worn out textiles, there wasn't like sort of a huge difference between these banks and sort of other banks we have across the country. It's that didn't really appear. We did also do a survey, so I think some of the eco-conscious people filled in this survey, so we had about 80 responses, and those people were actually super keen. So they were saying they really like the service, they find it really easy to separate items, And somebody even said they drove specifically to get to one of our sites to donate some worn-out clothes. So the eco-conscious customers are, worried about, where do I put this worn-out stuff? I don't want to give it to charity. I don't really want to put it in my black bin. What can I do with it? So they were sort of really keen to see these solutions, but clearly that doesn't quite translate to the rest of the population quite yet. But it was, it was a short trial, wasn't it, Joe?
Probably too short a trial, but we now know we've got to do more. But what I would say is I'm disappointed there are no Q&A, but please come and find me at coffee, and if you do have a question, I'll give you an answer.
I should also say that my colleague Bernie, who's there in the audience, maybe you can put your hand up. He's done most of the work on this trial, and Adam asked me to present at this one, I guess, to mix it up a bit, because Bernie is at the next session. But if you have any questions, please come find me or Bernie afterwards.
Are you going to stand up, Bernie? Just to really put yours. There he is, his hand's up. There you go.
I think what we did see, though, the consumers' behaviours continue to change. And even though it was only a short period of time, the engagement was there. He brought back more overall than the other sites where we didn't have 2 textile banks. So it continues to work. The appetite is there, and we've got more to do.
Cool. Next up is Peter from the TRI.
Thanks, Ross. So I represent the TRI Group, who are Europe's largest collector and sorter of textiles in the UK. We have 5 sorting facilities over the UK in Northern Ireland, and we employ about 1,200 people across these sites, where we sort and grade over 100,000 tonnes last year, and we're already due to surpass that this year, and we're now in end of September. So as part of Work Package 2, we partnered with Kirklees Council to trial 2 clothing banks, one for rewearable textiles, the same as Salvation Army, and one for non-rewearable textiles. And we engaged with 10,000 residents through leaflet drop and through online publications. If you just want to do the next slide. And with consultation with the council, we made it as simple as possible as we could. A blue bank for rewearable and a red one for non-rewearable. And we have seen encouraging signs that they're being used properly, but there's still a lot of engagement needed with the consumer to make sure their habits change. So yeah, if you go to the next slide, so you can see here from the pie charts, the rewearable textile banks and the non-rewearable textile banks, the reuse and recycling is very similar to Salvation Army's data. That actually the NRT bank has over 65% of rewearable textiles in it, rather than non-rewearable. So that data there is key for what we're looking for. And what we did with the non-wearables is we sorted it and graded it and then put it through our automatic sorting, scanning for fibre composition. And from here you can see that actually the highest proportion of fibre composition is mixed fibres. So rather than 100% cotton, 100% polyester, the majority of the fibre composition was mixed fibres. So yeah, so that's it.
Right, we're now opening it up to me. So I want to sort of try and keep it, I know having worked with you guys for the last year that conversations tends to flow and develop, so I want to try and keep that within the panel. So I'm going to try and ask some sort of semi-leading questions, but obviously with each of you it's going to depend on how you answer. And I think the main one is, we said the industry's broken, there's a wealth of clothing out there in the world that nobody knows what to do with. It took a lot of leap of faith to do this, to put your hands up and say, we're going to actively go out and get something that's probably got zero value or negative value. It's a big thing. And I just wanted to, from each of you, sort of within your own respective companies, if there was anything that sort of like led you to force this forward. I know Joe mentioned earlier what led Tesco to this, but also if you had internally what sort of was put out there, what was the thinking inside, and, obviously, where do you think this leading next? What's the next step? So fairly open, but I think we should go along the line. If that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for us, similar to what Joe was saying with net zero, we have some really strategic goals over the next not very long now, to 2030, 2035 and 2040. And there's only so much you can do, obviously, with the design element. We're doing loads of decarbonisation within our manufacturing supply chain, but actually the post-consumer waste is a massive challenge. But also the input into our fibres. At the moment, we all know that recycled polyester comes from bottles. Reality is it should be coming from fibre-to-fibre recycling. And that's a big part of what we want to do and want to be part of this revolution. And so it was really important for us to be part of this trial, even though we knew at this point there's not exactly that, the waste that we were collecting, we didn't necessarily have an outlet that could make Oxfam money at this point. So that was a big challenge, and that's why we were worried that we weren't going to be able to collect wearable textiles at the same time and be able to see that uplift of products coming in. But we just think it's a really important part to be part of this industry change. It isn't just about the products we design and making sure we're putting the right products on the market and making them it's also about kind of the fibres at the other end, and also having exactly the EPR, the end producer responsibility. So really to what happens next.
Get that circular economy and start kick-starting it, and we've got to start somewhere.
And I think just going back to the consumer, we can see there from the two banks and a little bit about what we saw from the Oxfam trial, there's that consumer message. And I think as retailers and brands, we're really powerful in that we do have the avenue to the direct consumer, and we can have that consumer message and do that outlet about being able to bring that product back and do something with it and stop it going into the bin. So also to be part of that customer messaging was really important to us.
Quite a similar answer. I mean, for us it's about finding our role and our position in that future state, future model, circular economy. We've got 540 shops on the high streets in the UK. We also have the postal donation scheme. We also have textile donation banks, so we are handling a lot of textiles. And so finding a model, given the challenges in the recycling sector in the UK, finding a future model that works on all sides in terms of its viability and our ability to collect and move that material around is really important for the future of our role as a charity and as a high street presence. And this was a really interesting way for us to test something and do something different than what we've done for the last 80 years, where we've had charity shops and think differently about the role that we can play in collecting those textiles.
Do you think, obviously yours was a postal service, and the amount of media you got was amazing. Was there a concern that we've opened the floodgates and now everyone's going to assume that you can send NRTs into you and it's going to change the dynamic of the business? Yeah,
I mean, we were definitely in all of our comms and media and the kind of interviews we were giving. Our media team were very keen that we stress it's a limited trial, it's just this trial, please don't inundate us with this in general, because at the moment we don't have an outlet for it. We're testing a model to see what it looks like. That was a fear, because we don't have the solution for it at the moment. Luckily it didn't happen. We did get some stuff where it was a whole bag of NRT, but there was enough good stuff in there as well. But it's definitely a question, particularly with postal, because it's not the cheapest way to collect textiles. You have to, particularly because we're sending the bag out to people, we cover the cost of the postage to return it as well. So that the viability of that model is really key in terms of the value we can realise from the NRT as well.
I think the benefit of doing it, though, on the postal was the fact that you don't have to leave the house, and there is something about that for the future, whatever the future system looks like. There does need to be some kind of curbside potential to this, whatever we do, because there are people that don't have cars, transportation, can't go to the banks. So we do need to think if whatever this new system has is how can we make sure there's that dry collection, because it isn't plastics, it isn't batteries. We need to think about how can we collect textiles at curbside in the future that can be dry and protected. So that's what we did learn, is that we were able to get quite a lot of stuff because people could post it from their house and make that simple.
And this is where the different models are interesting, and this is kind of RAP's job to kind of compare them and kind of get the learnings from them in the final report. But understanding someone who's proactively requested a bag, how does their behaviour and understanding differ from someone who walks up to a bank on a car park and is met with two, and maybe they're someone that wants to engage in that, and maybe they're just someone who wants to drop and run. So the comparability between the trials is what's going to be really interesting.
So over to Satco and Tesco's. Are the banks still out there? Have you drawn them back in? And
The banks are still out there for now. We haven't quite finished the trial yet, so we're still wrapping all of that up. But you know, there is a net cost. So I think it's we were keen to get involved in this trial to sort of understand, you know, how might we get the public to get along to collect more NRT, and it's definitely needed to scale up the recycling market as well. We need to get that extra volume, but it's definitely a net cost to the business. The additional the transport and the sorting cost involved, it doesn't outweigh the income that we get for the textiles. So we really see a need for EPR to support the collection system.
So you did, I think Joe alluded that, you saw an uplift in the amount collected. So do you think if you sort of put this out across the country that would keep going, or do you think it might have just been that people turn it? I don't know. I'll throw it over to you, Joe.
Well, we've still got the target that I mentioned earlier to take back more than we sell. And it was something that Sue touched on earlier. How do you get the right people in the organisation sharing that same objective? Over 350,000 people work at Tesco. What we had to do was get myself, the head of buying, the head of properties and car parks. Yes, there's someone who's head of properties and car parks at Tesco, and the head of store ops. So we shared the objective to maximise that take back. And only if we hit that target would we get a good end of year review. From our line manager, would we be considered for that promotion? Would we get the bonus if there was a bonus? So you can see how, when I said earlier, we shouldn't incentivise the consumer, but we have to incentivise the brands and retailers to make this happen. So shared objectives will deliver increased take back.
Right, I'm now going to really put Peter on the spot here.
Thanks, Ross.
Because I think the results showed that the public perhaps didn't quite know what NRTs or RTs were. It was showing quite similar levels. There was differences, but as you've said, sort of textile sorting is very subjective. As the TRI group, you have how many people each day sorting and grading clothing?
Over 1,200 people across the country.
1,200 people sorting and grading clothing. Do you think that maybe we've got it wrong and assumed that most people are putting their rubbish, worn-out ones, in the bin, and there just happens to be lots and lots of re-wearable textiles? And I guess, the next one that everyone sort of said is, how big a part is education? Is this something that should be taught at schools, or do you think it's through the media? Over to you guys.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that we're going to have is finding out what this residual waste textiles is that's going into the black bin. How do we collect it? How do we sort it? And what proportion is actually rewearable out of that? We won't know that until we have a standardised process for collecting this, whether it's curbside, which probably won't work due to the weather incumbent. But we need to have a process for this material, and ultimately, as a group, we have 30% of what we collect as NRTs. If we're going to try and collect this material from residual waste, or before it gets to residual waste, we're going to see that 30% rising. We need to have outputs for that. We need to have EPR funding. We need legislation to help push that forward.
On the education piece, I just think, Hypno Dog. Why not?
Yeah, Hypno, then we can get some banging tunes, isn't it, Adam? Is that 1 minute? 2? Oh, thank you. So we can just sit here. Joe, you can make up a song in that time, I'm sure.
Yeah, look, I would like to think 6 years ahead from now. What's the conversation you want to be happening on the 26th of September in 2030? Yeah? Are you going to be proud that you've been part of the change? Or are you going to be saying, shit, we failed? I know which one I'm choosing. We succeeded, and I'm so optimistic that we will succeed. We have to.
I'm actually going to say something on that. I went to an event last night, and it struck me, in my lifetime, somebody had a conversation in a boardroom and went, you know what we're going to do? We're going to produce clothing so cheap that people are going to wear it once or twice and throw it away. And somebody else sat there and went, you must be mad. And the designer probably went, well, that's given me a hard job. And the production team have gone, zut alors, this is impossible. But we've trained a generation to buy clothing and throw it away. We can train the generation to actually look and think about what they're doing to it. So I'm going to leave it on that. Thank you, guys.